and I, we need to talk. That the end of my Benjamin.
All right, so sometimes I do get requests from friends who want to get into photography as a hobby, on like they want to know the basics of photography, they want to know how to operate the cameras, they want to learn something about cameras. So I decided to just do a small tutorial which would satisfy all these people who keep asking for help on photography. This information will satisfy all of you so that you can practice from then onwards. Okay, so let's go straight into it. Okay, so I have 3 cameras here just to explain to you what kind of cameras you have and how to locate these basic settings on each camera. Basically, when you are starting out, you normally, it's not common for people to go straight to the professional body. This is a Canon 5D Mark II, which is mostly used by professionals because it's a full frame and it has other advanced features that basic cameras don't have. So this is a Rebel T4. It's one of my old cameras. I've not really used it much, but this is an entry-level camera, and most makeup artists and family people, new dads and new moms can use these cameras to get good images. And this is also the 70D. 70D is much higher than the Rebel. Okay, it has other features that might help you do a bit advanced stuff. We are looking at the shutter speed, we are looking at the aperture, we are looking at ISO. Those are the basic things that you need to understand about your camera. Photography has to do with light. So when we talk of shutter speed, it deals with light in a different way. When we talk of aperture, it deals with light in a different way. When we talk of ISO, it deals with light in a different way. So we'll start with the shutter speed. Okay, now the shutter is the mirror we see inside here. Yeah, you see the mirror go up and down as I click. Now this button here is the shutter, right? This button here is the shutter. Now when you press this, it releases the shutter. All right, so the shutter speed controls this blade here, and then that in turn controls the amount of light that enters the camera as you press this. Now our setting here is 50. We are shooting at 1/50th of a second. All right, so at 1/50th of a second, this is how fast the shutter closes. Now, just for example or demonstration sake, we are shooting now at 1/4000th of a second. Now, this is way faster than the 50th. Now, let's go way lower. Right now, it's on 1/4 of a second. You see, it slows down. Now, by so doing, it allows more light into the sensor. Now, all these things we talk about in photography differ from situation to situation. Okay, once I'm saying if you need more light, you should go to 1/4. Doesn't mean when you are shooting sports or when you are shooting a wedding or when you are shooting something outdoors and you go to 1/4, it will automatically work. It is just the understanding that you need. Okay, so when I say 1/4, I am not saying always you have to use 1/4. I'm just saying when you go to a lower shutter speed like 1/4 or any other lower shutter speed, according to the other settings that you have, which is the ISO and the aperture, it will work perfectly for you. Okay, So we move to the aperture settings, and on the T4, changing the aperture, you need to press the AV button here. You press the AV button, yeah, you press it, hold it, and then you scroll to change the aperture number. Okay, so if you want to go down low, you scroll to the left. The lens I have on can go as low as 2.8, so that's where it's going to stop. And then if you go high, it goes to a high of 22, I think. Yeah, 22. All right. Most of you with a kit lens and a camera body, your lenses would go, I think the lowest is 3.5 to 5.6. Apertures normally can also control, or do also control, light, and they control the intake of light and how the exposure comes out. Now, if you see a picture with a blurred background, most of you see pictures with blurred backgrounds and you love it. Okay, how to get that setting, or how to do that on your camera, is to control your aperture settings. Now, just the aperture settings will not get you the blurred background. You need to understand distance and background, okay? Your distance, the subject's distance to the background. So if I am close to a wall and you shoot at 2.8, the wall will be in focus because I am that close to the wall. But if the wall is a bit further, maybe 10 feet away from the person, then you can get a blurred background shooting at 2.8. Do you understand? But if you have a kit lens, say you are shooting at 5.6, if you want a blurred background, the best way to do it is to get the subject or the person you are shooting move away from the background you want to blur out. All right, picking from the example of this video, you see the background is very blurred. It's because we are shooting this video at an aperture of, say, 2.8. So you can't see the walls behind me clearly. All right, so that's what we mean by depth of field, and that is controlled by the aperture. So another thing about aperture, as I said, all these other settings control light. So as you reduce or you open your lens to get the depth of field and the bokeh and all those things you like, you have to understand that it is allowing more light into the frame. All right, it is allowing more light into the sensor. So as you reduce the aperture, it becomes more brighter, and you need to compensate with some other thing, maybe the shutter speed or the ISO. So let's move into the ISO and then understand what it also does. All right, so we move to ISO. Now, with the ISO for the T4i, you can change it here. It's written boldly here, ISO. So you can see it here, right? And when you press it, it starts from 100 to 12,800. Now, professional cameras move higher than that. So all these things make one camera more expensive than the other. As I said, it ranges from 100 to 12,800. And the ISO basically is the fastest way you can introduce light into your sensor. Okay, it's the easiest and fastest way, but it also comes with its own problems, especially in low light situations when you've tried everything and the only thing you need to increase is ISO. especially for the makeup artist, when you are in the wedding situation and you also want to take pictures like the professional photographer. The only thing you have is the ISO if you don't have a flash. But what the ISO does is, once it gets higher, it introduces more noise into the picture, or more grain into the picture. As in, for the shutter speed, you can control the light by slowing the shutter or opening the shutter for a longer period. That's how it brings in light. For the aperture, you can open the lens so that you get more light in it. But for the ISO, it processes it on the sensor. So the sensor kind of boosts out its mechanism to get in more light, or to be more sensitive to light, so that the little light you have in a room, once you increase the ISO from say 100 to 800, with the same light, is going to try to do more. So all these three things are the basics you need for your introduction to photography. All right. One way I encourage people to practice or to learn the basic settings is to shoot indoor and then move outdoor, especially for those who want to get into wedding photography. The best way to practice is to shoot more indoors and then outdoors. Or if you are into portraits, or maybe for makeup artists like this, for example, you need to be shooting more people. So if you have a friend at home or a brother at home, you should use them to practice. Now, the best way to know if your picture is well exposed, I mean, if you are not a professional and you can't see that it is well exposed, even for professionals, sometimes you think it is well exposed, but when you get home, it is overexposed or underexposed. So the best way to know you are very correct is to go to your histogram. When you press your info button on the T4, I think it's the same on every camera. You press the info, you will get a histogram. I don't know if you can get it from there. You'll get a histogram. This thing, this small thing right here. Do you get it? Okay, this small thing right here is called a histogram. It shows you where more of your colors are. All right. So if the frame is more dark, it will move to the left. This picture is quite dark. This picture is quite dark, right? So looking at the histogram, you see that the bars have moved to the left. Left is for darks, right is for whites. Okay, so that's how it is. Now let me take another picture and just try and overexpose it. The fastest way, let me just increase my ISO and get good. So the second image is overexposed, right? And the fastest way to see it is by looking at your histogram. You see that the bars are to your right, okay? Which means it is overexposed. The other picture, the bars were to your left, so they were underexposed. If you get well exposed picture, it will balance out, all right? Let's get a well exposed picture. This is an example, all right? It's not a perfectly exposed picture, but it's fine. You can see an example. The blacks are okay. The whites are also okay. They are not sliding to one side specifically, like this one. Majority of it is on the higher side, which means it is overexposed. This majority on the left, which means it's underexposed. All right. Okay. This is it. Overexposed, normal, and then this is just pure white, so you won't get anything on the histogram. All right, it's just a pure white picture when I was doing the open shutter. So everything is white. All right, so it's presumably it is out of the frame of the histogram. All right, so that's basically it. So what you need to do more is try using the shutter speed to control light, then you use aperture to control light, and then you use ISO to control light. These three things.